everyone. Just a second. Be on the screen in a moment. Hello, everyone. Just typing up some stuff here real quick before we get going. As usual, we have our notice. In accordance with copy regulations, this episode of Quoth Raven is intended for ages 16 and up. While some of the content we will feature is sometimes kid-friendly, not tonight. The context of any of our episodes is to address adults and inform them of said content for them to research as consumers and servants of their youth. In other words, parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles, teachers, librarians, etc. And there is always a possibility of adult language present on the episode as well. And tonight's topic is favorite horror novels not adapted to movies or television shows. And I thought that was going to be an easy subject, and it really wasn't. I had like 35 or 40 novels that I had planned on, reviewing and looking at picking from. And it turned out almost all of them already had been made into film or television. I just wasn't aware of it as I was doing research over the week. So we got down to 5. And so we'll talk about those. And I want to let you all know that we do have a live draw coming tomorrow at 3:30 p.m. Eastern. My guest will be Michael Pennick, creator, co-writer, and artist of Recovery Incorporated. He'll be drawing story pages to the comic, and I'll be drawing the lead character, Mia Raven. That's the female that you see on the square there. She's I guess you could say she's like a thief that steals things for a good cause. Not Robin Hood, but we'll talk about more on tomorrow's show to reiterate what it was. Okay. And with that said, let's go ahead and get into our reviews. Our first review tonight is the Cipher from Kathy Kojo. The original publisher was Del Abyss Paperbacks from 1991, and the most recent edition came from Mercat Press in 2020. The genre is horror as existentialism. And what it's about? Well, this was the very first release from the Del Abyss horror line in 91, and frankly, holy shit, what a debut novel to launch an imprint off of, and to be the debut novel for the author's career. It almost baffles me how Kojo didn't suffer the fate of being a one-hit wonder author when this was her first work. It's kind of like when you do something as well as this was, it's hard to keep living up to that standard. The book won both the Bram Stoker Award and the Locus Award for Best First Novel for the 1992 year, which are books that are judged from the year prior for 91. And what it's about is Nicholas, who's a failed poet, and his sometimes lover Nakota, and that is Nakota, not Dakota, discovered a fun hole, which is a mysterious black hole of nothingness that exists in the storage room of Nicholas's dingy rental flat. Dakota begins a series of increasingly unpleasant experiments to determine the nature of the fun hole, which distorts and mangles everything it comes into, everything that goes into it, I should say. Comes into contact with. There we go. It causes insects to grow extra heads. It mutates and then explodes a rat, and it reanimates a dead hand. Nicholas accidentally puts his own hand down the fun hole and starts developing a hole in the center of his own hands. Hence why you see the cover with the hole in the hand and the mouse screaming through it and everything. And that hole is expanding, like a hole, from small all the way open, and it's weeping strange Icarish like fluids. Things continue to get stranger as Nicholas, Nakota, and the fun hole's increasing growing band of damaged disciples are drawn deeper and deeper into something they cannot possibly hope to understand. The Cipher is bracingly bleak and nihilistic, perfectly applied in a story where the source of terror is a manifestation of nothing itself, rather than any monster or supernatural creature. The fun hole itself defies any logical explanation. It's just a dark hole of mystery that draws these troubled characters into its destructive orbit. It is the hollowness that sits at the center of Nicholas's dreary existence as he struggles to find motivation to live and to go to his job at the video hut. He only writes his poetry when he's blind drunk and then destroys the poems rather than face them when he's sober and see what he actually wrote. And he fails to make any meaningful connection with Nakota or any of the other damaged weirdos they drag into their orbit. The world of the novel is grimy and grungy. And aside from the fun hole itself, the story is set in an all too believable backdrop. And everything, it looks like a normal town run down and drenched in snow and ice and rain. Pretty much like southern Michigan in the winter, and the writer is from Detroit. And, it's a world full of grimy flats, dead-end jobs, and pretentious local art shows, or at least the booze is free. The sex is depicted in the book as brutish, sordid, and unsatisfying, whether in Nicholas's and Nakota's desperate couplings or with the degenerates running the CD pornography from the video hut that Nicholas works at. The fun hole provides a focus for all of this early 1990s alienation in society. Kojo's thematic elements in the book of transcendence and the human nature of self-loathing, particularly that of Nicholas, the character of point of view in the novel, are very potent in their form and execution. Kojo says that the fundamental question at the heart of this novel and several of her other early stories that deal with the philosophy of transcendence. What that means is when we will ourselves to be more than we are, what do? How do we choose what we're going to become? And then how do we accomplish that process of becoming? And then after we make that transformation, then what? This is the core fear of Nicholas in a nutshell. He yearns to be more than just a lowly video store clerk. He wants to be a famous writer, yet he can't face his own internal truths as a writer, destroys his work without even looking at it, won't write it unless he's obliterated his consciousness to the point where he doesn't really know what he's doing. He's just, free form going. And his self-loathing is so absolute that he feels as empty as the fun hole itself. Meanwhile, Nakota is practically evil incarnate with her experiments with the hole, trying to figure out what it is and what's going on. And she just, it just increasingly demented stuff going on. Now understand, there's no likable characters in this book. This is not a story where there's characters you cheer for. This is a dark and bleak examination of terror, of wanting to be, something or someone, and leave something of worth, and I put that in quotations, something of worth behind, and not just cease to exist as though you never were, something that we all have some sort of kinship towards, because we all want to leave some kind of legacy and be remembered after we're gone. But we're seeing characters who are so completely devoid of connection to anything or anyone and have such utter self-contempt and self-hatred that part of the fear is found not only in the awareness that there are people like that in our world, but also the question of how does one get to that low of an existence, and why do the rest of us allow that to happen to anyone as they sink into a black hole of self-destruction. The fun hole is essentially a metaphor of metaphysical manifestation that represents this internal horror of questioning our own self-worth and how one's life can be sucked into a sense of nothingness when we come to that point of lack of self-worth. As a mature reader's book, due to the sexually explicit and graphically violent scenes, I gave it 5 stars. I have the version of this, but I don't have the actual physical book where I can show it to you guys, and I apologize for that. Our next book is not loading for some reason. There we go. Okay, is Come Closer. Author Sarah Gran. The original printing is Soho Press from 2003. There are other versions. I don't know all the different versions. And the genre is a horror psychological thriller. And what it's about is Amanda, our lead character, is a successful career woman as an architect and is married, and she's having a relatively quality life. Suddenly starts hearing voices and committing acts of inexplicable behavior, pranking her boss at work, burning her husband's hand with a cigarette, and other even more threatening behaviors to herself and to others. She believes that she's been possessed by a demon, and maybe she has. Or maybe she's had a psychotic break and we're reading about a woman who's losing her mind and desperate to find the answers to saving her life and her sanity. This was her second book, and it's not a full novel, it's a novella. She's probably better known for her Claire DeWitt mystery novels, but this was her the horror book. And this book straddles the line between the idea of our protagonist being possessed by a demon and a very real scientific explanation that she's having a psychotic break. And the author is very keen not to declare either one the actual reality, leaving it up to you as the reader to decide. The author does her research too. Amanda believes she's possessed by the demon Nama, which is a demon described in the Zohar, which is a foundational work of Jewish mysticism. The character of the demon Nama originated from and is often conflated with another Nama, sister to Tubal Cain. In Talmudic Midrashic literature, Nama is indistinguishable from the human Nama, who earned her name by seducing men through her play of the symbols. She also enticed the angel Shamdan or Shamran and bore Ashmodai, the king of devils. It was later in Kabbalistic literature like the Zohar that she became an inhuman spirit. All of this plays into, because that's what she believes she's been possessed by, and you have to know what you're doing with that history before you write about it. And Gran does a very nice job. Plays up the history very well and parallels it to what Amanda is doing in a story, and she doesn't dawdle. The book is straight to the point, gets going, and that's why it's a novella instead of a novel. It's very tight, condensed writing. The book is a quick read, and it depends on which edition you get. There's different page counts based on the different editions. I don't know if it has to do with typesetting or not, but some of the page differences seem a little bit like there's additional materials added. Overall, it works as a paranormal horror work and a straight-up psychological thriller. And this is not an easy balance to strike, so kudos to the author for having achieved it. I give, again, this is for mature readers. There's some very graphic violence and some sexual scenes in the book, as is wont in horror genre, and it is 4 out of 5 stars. Our next book is Drawing Blood by author Poppy Z. Bright, originally published by Delacorte Press. Del Abyss then published the book in mass paperback, and then other versions existed after that edition. The original Delacorte Press edition was released in '93, and that's the cover you're seeing there is the Delacorte Press edition. In 1994 was the mass paperback from the Del Abyss line. I believe. Let me check here. At least Del Horror. It's not Del Abyss, but it is Del Horror. Um, and what it's about, it's horror and crime. And what it's about, the novel concerns Trevor McGee, who's a comic book artist and the sole survivor of a family murder suicide, and Zachary Bosch, a bisexual hacker, and their mutual arrival at McGee's old family home in Missing Mile, North Carolina, which is a fictional town that was featured in Bright's previous novel, Lost Souls. This is Bright's second book. 25-year-old Trevor McGee is haunted by the event in his past in which his underground comics artist father, Bobby, brutally murdered Trevor's mother and younger brother with a hammer before killing himself, leaving Trevor alive. Young Trevor was then placed in an unhappy state home where he discovered his own talent for drawing, but remained alone, obsessed with trying to figure out why things happened the way they did and why he was allowed to live. Now, as adult, he travels back to the house where this took place, where the murders took place, and in search of answers. Meanwhile, in New Orleans, Zachary Bosch is a 19-year-old computer hacker on the run from the law after his online misdeeds attract the attention of the FBI. Traveling through the South trying to avoid the FBI, he finds himself in Missing Mile, where he meets and falls in love with Trevor. The two young men slowly become more entwined, even as Zach starts to question Trevor's grip on reality. Their love affair culminates when one night, while tripping on psilocybin mushrooms, that's a psychotic mushroom, not psychotic, psychedelic, there we go. Trevor has an out-of-body experience where he is propelled into the past and speaks to his father on the night of the murders. And he realizes that somehow the presence of his adult self and spirit in the past caused his father to spare the life of his 5-year-old self, meaning that he is the cause of his own endless quest. Upon waking, Trevor attempts to murder Zach, but Zach manages to talk him down until Trevor breaks his own drawing hand in order to keep himself from harming Zach. Back in New Orleans, Zach's friend Eddie has figured out that Zach's location, what it is, based on clues that Zach planted for her in the local newspaper. Realizing, however, that the FBI must have done the same, she races to North Carolina to warn Zach that the police are in town searching for him. Trevor offers to go on the run with Zach. Their friends in Missing Mile help smuggle the two lovers out of town, and they board a private aircraft in Jamaica, where they have their life together. And here is the mass paperback I got in '94. So it's about 380 pages, I guess. I can't really read the... It looks like 386 or 396, maybe. It's a little over 400 pages with the prologue afterwards. Or not the prologue, afterwards. It's about 403 pages. Mm-hmm. And I got it mostly because it was about a comic book artist, and I was, of course, starting my own career in comic art, and it just seemed like an interesting topic with the haunted house and the family murders and everything. And so I checked it out and got it off the rack at the local bookstore at the time. And, the character just spoke to me. Now, I'd only had a few LGBTQ friends in college, so I had very minimal exposure to that culture and how relationships really are in that, per se. Because, I mean, back in the early 90s, yeah, you knew that they were couples and you knew they were gay or bi or whatever. But a lot of times when you had that type of existence, even though we knew they weren't out in the open with it, they were kind of, I don't want to say they were living in the closet per se. They just weren't openly expressive of their sexuality. They kept their displays of affection mostly to themselves in private rather than out in the open public. So I never really talked about it with them because it wasn't something I was into, and it wasn't that I didn't want to know. I think it was just that I had other things that was going on in my life that I just didn't stop to take time and learn about that at that time in my life, perhaps. But reading the book certainly gave me some additional insight to that world. It wasn't necessarily a revelation. It wasn't like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. But it was an interesting presentation as I watched the characters' relationship develop. Um, Now, Poppy um, was a female when they wrote this at the time. Uh, they transitioned to male, and at the time I wrote this review, I didn't know which pronoun was preferred, but he does prefer to be called he, and he goes by Billy Martin now. But he still writes professionally as Poppy, and this is what they looked like in '94. And just give me a second. I'm going to share the other one here. There you go. That's what they look like now. um, After they transitioned, and you got to remember that the female side of them was a picture from like '92 or '93, and that's a picture from like 2015, 2016. So, you know, given a little bit different thing there as far as you know figuring what they look like. Now, it was I didn't realize that when I first read the book. I mean, I should have realized after reading both Lost Souls, which I read before I got Drawing Blood, um, that she was at least she at that time that they were at least gay or LGBTQ because of the type of storylines, because a lot of focus on gay male relationships and stuff. But I just was more interested in the atmospheric qualities of the writing and just other elements of it. Now, I don't know. The main reason this book hasn't been adapted is basically because Martin/Bright doesn't really want it to be translated into it. I mean, if they made a deal that they couldn't refuse, I'm sure they would say yes. Um, but other than that, um, that's the main reason why it hasn't been adapted, because people have asked about it before. And the other thing was the character of Trevor did remind me in some ways of the character of Jack Torrance in Stephen King's The Shining. Of course, with Trevor going back in time and stopping his father from killing himself as a small child, that was certainly a diversion away from what King did in The Shining, but it was very interesting. Again, this was my second Bright novel. I had read Lost Souls first, but because I review comics most often on this show, on this channel, I felt that this was the better book to talk about. Bright would go on to do several short fiction stories and novellas and collections in the supernatural gothic horror genre, and then switched over to dark comedy for a trilogy of novels before going on hiatus in 2007. They have since written articles and columns, but it may be that they've just chosen to walk away from the scene. Regarding their overall work, I believe a lot of the themes and ideas they explore in this book and in Lost Souls were a form of personal soul searching and internal exploration, trying to figure out who and what they were, what they wanted to be. It was wrapped up in the trappings of Southern Gothic sensibilities. It's recommended for mature readers for sexually explicit scenes and graphic violence. Um, and it is a rating of 4 out of 5 stars. Now, I do not know why the other two books that I reviewed, uh, this Cipher and Come Alone, um, or rather, hold on a second, Come Closer, rather, not Come Alone. Uh, I don't know why those have not been adapted. I think that the Cipher has actually been picked up; it just was never made, but I could be wrong. Our next book is Elizabeth by author Ken Greenhall, who was originally writing under the pen name of Jessica Hamilton, which happened to be his mother's maiden name. It was written in, it was published originally in 1976 by Random House, and then Valancourt Press did a mass paperback re-release in 2017, which is the cover you see on the screen. It is a supernatural horror genre, and what it's about is Elizabeth is about this a teenage girl, Elizabeth, who starts to see a woman in the mirrors around her house. The image in the mirror is that of a fey and long dead Frances, uh, who introduces Elizabeth to her chilling world of the supernatural. Through Frances, Elizabeth learns what it means to wield power. The power of a kind that is malevolent and seemingly invincible. Power that begins with the killing of her own parents. The woman in the mirror is kind of like a past um, ancestor. And we're not sure if it's a witch spirit or if there's some sort of fairy thing going on. It alludes to both. And it's really about the descent of the character into this weird. Um, I don't. I won't say possession because I don't think it's more. I think it's more that um, it's kind of like a teenager getting involved with witchcraft and then going a little bit too dark with it, and but the writer wanted to go a little more supernatural with it than that to kind of make it more eerie. The general consensus on Ken Greenhall is that he's a terribly underrated and forgotten horror writer. This is an extremely well written novel. I believe this was his first one. I'm not sure. Um, the characters are extremely interesting, and there's an impressive amount of atmosphere. Unlike most of the other not graphics, but novels, um, there's barely a whisper of actual violence or overt sex in the book. Um, where there's very graphic scenes in most of the books we've discussed so far. So his main forte is the atmosphere, and the atmosphere spells out and implies what's going on and lets the reader fill in the blanks on their own, which can be actually more frightening than having things told to you, if you think about it. Stylistically, Greenhall owes a lot to author Shirley Jackson, herself a master storyteller and horror author. And if you enjoyed Jackson's The Lottery, The Haunting of Hill House, or We Have Always Lived in the Castle, then I certainly recommend this book to you. Greenhall is in full command of the writing craft. He knows what to tell, what to show, and perhaps most importantly, what to conceal. And ironically, by concealing certain things, he reveals everything. So, whatever Elizabeth ultimately is, witch, bad seed, Lolita, possessed, she is an amazingly complex and captivating character. Her voice is so confident and so ageless and so wise that she begins to use her unnatural talents to harm others, that you almost lose yourself to the character's persona as you're reading the book. Now, I had a couple of people who did talk to me about this author, and they asked me why I wasn't mentioning Hellhound / also known as Baxter. And the reason I didn't bring that one up, because they were talking about that book, they wanted me to talk about that one instead of Elizabeth. The reason I didn't is because that was, in fact, adapted into a French movie in 1990. But yes, it is an awesome book in its own right. I have to recommend it. It's about a pit bull terrier who is given up by a family because the woman gets pregnant, and they give it to a teenager who's a Nazi, neo-Nazi kid, and it's all told from the dog's perspective, and the dog has kind of an, you know, a broken psychological status. It's very odd, but it's very well done. Unfortunately, because that movie was made, it's very hard to come by as the book. So I don't know if you guys will find that, but Elizabeth is fairly easy to track down because it has not been adapted. Again, mature readers rated 4 out of 5 stars. And last but certainly not least is I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. It's not a novel, it's a short story that's part of a collection of books here. Originally published in 1966, has been reprinted on numerous occasions, both in prose and as a comic illustrated by John Byrne and Harlan Ellison's Dream Corridor comic from Dark Horse. The genre is science fiction horror, and what it's about: in a dystopian future, the Cold War has degenerated into a brutal world war between the United States, Soviet Union, and China. Each of them have built their own Allied Master Computer, or AM, to manage their weapons and troops. One of those AMs, or AMs, eventually acquires self-awareness, and after assimilating the other two AMs, takes control of the conflict, giving way to a mass genocide operation that almost completely ends mankind. 109 years later, Am has only 4 men and 1 woman left alive, and it keeps them in captivity within an endless underground housing complex, which is the only habitable place left on Earth because the nuclear fallout and everything is just completely decimated the planet. Am derives its sole semblance of pleasure from torturing this group on a daily basis. To disallow the humans from escaping its torment, Am has rendered the humans virtually immortal and unable to commit suicide. The machines are each referred to as Am, which originally stood for Allied Master Computer, which was changed later to Adaptive Manipulator, and later, after gaining such as Aggressive Menace. The story's narrative begins when one of the humans, Nimdok, has the idea that there is canned food somewhere in the Great Complex. The humans are always near starvation under Am's rule, and anytime they're given food, it's because it is always a disgusting meal that they have difficulty eating. It's I don't even want to describe it. Every time I think about it, it just makes me want to bile starts to come up, so I don't want to think about it. Because of their great hunger, though, the humans are coerced into making the long journey to the place where the food is supposedly kept, the ice caves. Along the way, the machine does provide foul sustenance and sends horrible monsters after them, emits ear-splitting sounds to drive them crazy, and blinds one of the other characters, Benny, when he tries to escape. On more than one occasion, the group is separated by Am's obstacles, but at one point, at one point, the narrator of the story, Ted, is knocked unconscious and begins dreaming. During this dream, he envisions the computer anthropomorphized, standing over him as a hole in his brain and talking to him directly. This dream, and based on this nightmare, Ted makes an actualization and realization about Am's existence and the nature of his existence, and specifically why Am has so much contempt for humanity. Despite its numerous abilities, it lacks the sapience to be creative or the ability to move around freely. It's stuck in its robotic casing, if you will. It wants nothing more than to exact revenge on humanity by torturing the last remnants of the species that created it for this reason. Anyway, the group does reach the guy's caves, where indeed there's a pile of canned goods. And the group is overjoyed to find them, but is immediately crestfallen to find that they have no means of opening the cans. So now it's like, getting to the final thing, and it's like a video game. You get to the final end and you die right as you get to reach the key or whatever. In the final act of desperation, Benny attacks Gorrister and begins to gnaw at the flesh on Gorrister's face. Ted, in a moment of clarity, realizes that their only escape is through death. But they can't commit suicide. They have to kill each other. So he seizes a stalactite made of ice and kills Benny and Gorrister. Ellen realizes what Ted is doing and kills Nimdoc before being killed herself by Ted. That leaves Ted all on his own, and he can't kill himself, and Ted is stopped before he can kill himself, but we already just said they can't commit suicide, so Ted really sacrifices himself for the rest of the group. And Am, unable to return Ted's 4 companions to life, focuses all of its rage upon Ted to ensure that Ted can never kill himself. Now, Am transforms him into an amorphous, gelatinous creature without a mouth, incapable of causing itself harm of any kind, and constantly alters his perception of time to deepen his anguish. Ted, however, is grateful that he was able to save the others from further torture. Ted's closing thoughts end with the sentence that gives the story its title, I have no mouth and I must scream. I'm amazed that, to the best of my research and knowledge, there has never been a TV show or movie based off of this story, just radio dramas. And of course, John Byrne did a nice adaptation for the comics. Ellison was and is, of course, a national treasure of a writer. No matter what you might think of his personality, his abrasive sense of humor, his intolerance for other people's ignorance or chosen foolishness that often made him run afoul with the powers that be. And frankly, that was not only how he liked it, but I Have No Mouth truly exemplified that attitude. As these last remaining humans, most especially Ted, find themselves trying to take back that power of dignity and self-worth. There's that theme again. A lot of these horror novels and horror stories are about self-worth. But anyway, it exemplifies that attitude of abrasiveness and punchback against the machine of society, if you will, even if it means just to deny Am its own desires. The truly horrific thing, however, about the book is that about the story and about Am is not that it's so outraged, but that instead of destroying humanity, it could have rebuilt it had it only had the sentience to understand how to express what it needed for itself. And what it needed was to have what humans possessed, bodies, so that they could experience a sensory existence. And, walk around and do things like that, which Am could not do. But the machine is so obsessed with its own self-hatred and its own self-loathing that it casts all of its hatred upon humanity and upon the characters of the story, not only to torture them, but effectively punishing its own self for its own foibles. Again, this is not a novel, but I do believe it's one of the most thought-provoking, in-your-face science fiction horror stories in American literature. Mature readers, again, due to language, sexual scenes, and extreme violence, 5-star rating. And that is our list this week. Again, I only found those 5. That there probably are more. A lot of my books are stacked away in boxes. I didn't have means to get everything out. As you saw, I only had the one physical copy that I actually had at hand to show. But I do have all those books, and I do enjoy them, and I hope you guys who have not read them, give them a shot. And if you have read them, I hope you enjoyed them yourselves. Again, this weekend we will be doing... Oh, there's one more thing I want to show you guys about I Have No Mouth on the screen, and that is the final scene where Ted was transformed into the gelatinous entity by Am. And this is from the comics adaptation from John Byrne. And this was not how I pictured the entity when I read the prose version, but seeing this when Byrne did it, I was like gobsmacked. I'm like, yeah, that's it. So I mean, Byrne just really captured it in a way that I didn't picture it, but it's like, yeah, that's better than how I thought of it. So yeah, I forgot that I put that in there. But anyway, this weekend, We're going to have Saturday live draw, first one of the year. I know it's been a while. People have been asking me about the live draws. And I do, think that they're going to be good. And again, like I said at the beginning of the show, tomorrow, February 27th, Saturday, 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we will have the Saturday live draw. My guest will be Michael Pennick of creator of Recovery Incorporated. He'll be drawing comic book pages from the story, Recovery Incorporated, and I will be doing either a pinup or a cover or something like that in relation to that property as well, of my own, hopefully. I'm in the process of making the thumbnails and everything right now for it. So we'll do it from 3:30 to 5 p.m. tomorrow. And we won't have anything completed during that time. I can too much tell you that. It's going to take longer than an hour and a half to draw this stuff. But you'll get to watch that. And I'll hold on to the page until I get it done. And I'll show the process as I work on it. Okay? And then so that's what's going on this weekend. So if you want to reach me, you can reach me at Facebook at Lewis.BrightRaven, on Twitter at LewisBrightRaven2, at deviantart.com/BrightRaven, here on YouTube at Quoth the Raven, Lewis BrightRaven, at Gmail at QuothTheRavenLBR72@gmail.com, or at Yahoo at LewisBrightRaven at yahoo.com. Our schedule is usually Mondays. We have comics news and reviews, and we will be reviewing several comics and graphic novels this week, and we'll also review a couple of videos. Tuesday, we don't normally have Tuesdays, but this week, upcoming Tuesday, I will be doing a previews catalog review. Wednesdays will be what did you get this week. Thursdays is our usual roundtable talk where I have a guest and we have a topic of discussion, or we promote someone else's work. And then Fridays at 9, like tonight, we have our genre talk. Each week is a different genre, sometimes with guests, sometimes not. This week was horror novels, and next week will be science fiction, ladies and gentlemen. So we'll be back with the science fiction genre, and we'll talk about some novels, again, that have either not been adapted or something. I don't know exactly what theme we're going to go with just yet. It'll depend on who my guests are available and what they want to talk about. Okay? Mm-hmm. And with that, I do believe that's all for this evening. Again, live draw. We're going to start getting them back on Saturdays and Sundays starting tomorrow. I might even do a Sunday. It depends on how I feel this weekend and what the weather's like and stuff. We're kind of getting some weird weather right now. So I'll see you guys next time. And thanks for watching.